In 2000, a mathematician published a formula that Wall Street had been waiting for. It was elegant, it was powerful, it could price something that had never been properly priced before: the risk that two borrowers would default on their loans at the same time. Banks immediately used it to build financial products worth trillions of dollars. Regulators trusted it. Rating agencies relied on it. The entire global credit market was restructured around it. 7 years later, it helped cause the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. The formula was called the Gaussian copula function. The mathematician was David Lai, and the story of what happened is not really a story about greed. It is a story about what happens when human beings trust a model more than they trust reality.
To understand what Lai's equation did, you need to understand the problem it solved. By the late 1990s, banks had developed a product called a collateralized debt obligation, a CDO. A CDO is essentially a bundle of loans, mortgages, credit card debts, car loans, packaged together and sold to investors as a single asset. The idea was that by bundling many loans together, you could diversify away the risk of any individual borrower defaulting. Even if one person stopped paying, the others would keep paying, and the overall investment would remain stable. The mathematical challenge was this: how correlated are those defaults? If one borrower defaults, how likely is it that others will default at the same time? If defaults are independent, if one person's financial trouble has no relationship to another's, the diversification works beautifully. But if defaults are correlated,
if the same economic conditions that cause one person to default cause many others to default simultaneously, the CDO is far more dangerous than it appears. Nobody had a reliable way to measure that correlation until David Lai. Lai's insight was to borrow a tool from an entirely different field: life insurance. Actuaries, the mathematicians who calculate insurance premiums, had long used a concept called the survival copula to model the correlation between when two people in the same household would die. If one spouse died, what was the probability the other would die within a similar time frame? The correlation was real, measurable, and could be modeled mathematically. Lai realized that bond defaults could be modeled the same way. Instead of asking when two people would die, he asked when two bonds would default. He used the prices of credit default swaps, financial instruments that function like insurance against a borrower defaulting, to infer the correlation between defaults from market prices themselves. The equation was published in the Journal of Fixed Income in 2000. Within months, it had been adopted across Wall Street. Within a few years, it was the standard tool for pricing CDOs globally. It was fast. It was tractable. It produced a single number, a correlation coefficient,
that could be fed into models and used to price instruments worth billions of dollars. And it had a fatal flaw. The flaw was hidden in an assumption so fundamental that almost nobody examined it. Lee's model inferred default correlations from the prices of credit default swaps. But credit default swaps were a relatively new market. The historical data they contained stretched back only a few years, and those years had been unusually stable. The model was calibrated to a period of low volatility, rising house prices, and falling default rates. It had never seen a housing market decline across the entire United States simultaneously. No data in the model contained that scenario, so the model assigned it a very low probability. And because the model said it was unlikely, the CDOs built using Lee's formula were rated as safe, AAA safe as United States government bonds. In 2006 and 2007, house prices across the United States began to fall. Not in one city, not in one region, everywhere at the same time. Default correlations did not behave the way the model predicted. When one borrower defaulted, their neighbours were defaulting too. Their colleagues were defaulting.
Across every state, in every income bracket, people who had been sold mortgages they could not afford began failing to pay them at exactly the same time. The correlation in the model was wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. The CDOs that had been rated AAA became worthless almost overnight. Banks that had loaded their balance sheets with these instruments suddenly found themselves holding assets with no value and no buyers. The credit markets froze. Lending stopped, and the cascade that followed — bank failures, government bailouts, mass unemployment, 8 million jobs lost in the United States alone — became the defining economic event of a generation. David Lai did not cause the financial crisis. Greed caused the financial crisis. Deregulation caused it. The incentive structures that rewarded bankers for selling products regardless of their actual risk caused it. But Lai's equation gave all of those forces a mathematical language that made them look precise, scientific, safe. The number the formula produced was not a measurement of reality. It was a measurement of a model of reality, built on data that did not contain the scenario it needed to survive. Statistician George Box wrote in 1976 that all models are wrong, but some are useful. What the financial crisis demonstrated is the other half of that warning, that a model can be extraordinarily useful right up until the moment it becomes extraordinarily dangerous. The Gaussian copula worked. In the conditions it was designed for, it worked well. The problem was not the mathematics. The problem was the belief that the mathematics had captured something permanent, that a formula built on a few years of stable data could describe the behavior of millions of human beings across every possible economic condition. Markets are not physical systems. They do not obey fixed laws. They are made of people responding to each other. And when enough people respond to the same crisis at the same time, no equation built on calmer data will see it coming. David Lai himself said it best. In 2005, 3 years before the collapse, he told a reporter that the most dangerous part of his model was the correlation number. He said, "Very few people understand the essence of the model. The most dangerous part is when people believe everything coming out of it." Nobody listened. They never do.